Ellie lives in a small town called Squamish. At school, she earns money by writing essays for other students. Even though this is technically cheating, her teacher, Mrs. Giselle, doesn't stop her. Instead, she jokes that she would rather read Ellie's well-written essays than the ones the other students would write on their own. One day, Mrs. Giselle hands Ellie an application for Grinnell College, encouraging her to apply. But Ellie declines, explaining that she has been offered a full scholarship to a local college and has to stay. Later, Ellie signs up for the winter talent show, though she doesn't really want to. It is a requirement for all seniors, so she has no choice but to participate. As Ellie rides her bike home from school, Paul Munsky, a classmate, approaches her. Unlike the other students who usually ask her to write essays, Paul has a different request. He wants her to write a love letter to Aster Flores. Ellie refuses, saying that love letters should be personal, and it wouldn't be right to write one for someone else. But there's another reason she turns him down. She has feelings for Aster too. Ellie has seen Aster at church while accompanying her father, Deacon Flores, and they have exchanged small conversations. They share an interest in books and movies, and Ellie has admired her from afar. At home, Ellie spends time with her father, Edwin, watching movies and helping him manage the household bills. When she notices that some of the bills are overdue, she decides to accept Paul's offer but at a higher price. Ellie reads Paul's letter to Aster and thinks it's poorly written. Paul insists that she wouldn't understand because she has never been in love. His comment annoys Ellie, but she writes the letter anyway. She includes a quote from Wim Wenders, hoping to make it sound more thoughtful. Aster responds but immediately recognizes that Paul didn't come up with the quote himself. Ellie writes another letter for Paul, this time making it more personal. She admits that she often hides behind other people's words and shares her own thoughts about the world. She writes that if she truly understood love, she would quote herself instead of borrowing words from others. Aster replies again, opening up about her own struggles. Excited by the exchange, Paul wants to text Aster right away, but Ellie stops him. She warns him that if he rushes, he will be just like everyone else. Instead, they continue writing letters, with Ellie crafting each message and Paul paying her for them. One day, Aster accidentally drops one of the letters on the floor. Mrs. Giselle finds it and confronts Ellie, questioning her about what she's been doing. Ellie insists that she will stop writing the letters, but she and Aster continue their exchange in secret. Through their letters, they open up about their fears, dreams, and personal struggles. Aster shares that she used to love painting but became afraid of making bold strokes, worried she might ruin what she had already created. Ellie, pretending to be Paul, encourages her to take risks and directs her to a wall where they take turns adding brushstrokes. Over time, their small strokes come together to form a beautiful painting of a girl reaching for a star. Meanwhile, Paul grows impatient with waiting and decides to text Aster himself. Worried that he will ruin everything, Ellie quickly tries to recover by switching to a ghost messenger. Aster, feeling bored while spending time with her shallow boyfriend, Trig, responds to the mysterious messages. Eventually, Paul and Aster go on their first real date. She gives him a book, The Remains of the Day *, believing he would like it based on their conversations. However, she had actually seen Ellie reading the book at school. Outside the restaurant, Ellie listens in as Paul struggles to say anything meaningful, leading to an extremely awkward and silent date. The next day, Ellie tells Paul that he should give up on Aster since they have nothing in common. But when Paul stands up for her against some bullies, Ellie changes her mind and decides to keep helping him. She begins teaching him about things she enjoys discussing with Aster, such as abstract art and classic British literature. She introduces him to existentialist ideas, has him watch Audrey Hepburn movies, and even tries to train him in making deeper conversation. To understand Aster better, they start observing her closely. They learn that she secretly enjoys horror movies, which surprises them. They also talk to Trig to find out his weaknesses, hoping it will help Paul win Aster over. One day, Paul asks Ellie why she stays in Squamish instead of leaving for better opportunities. Frustrated, she explains that her father moved to the town from China with a PhD, but because of his accent, he faced discrimination and was never able to get a job beyond Squamish. She has stayed to help him. She then turns the question on Paul, asking why he doesn't leave. He tells her that he has to stay for his family's sausage business. If he left, it would break his mother's heart. However, he has his own dreams. He wants to create a new kind of cuisine, something he calls the taco sausage, but his family refuses to take it seriously. He has even written to food critics in big cities, but none have responded. Back at school, Mrs. Giselle Schaap finds another letter that Aster drops. This time, she directly confronts Ellie, questioning why she spends so much time writing these letters but hasn't bothered to fill out an application for Grinnell College. Despite this, Ellie and Paul continue to spend time together and grow closer. As they talk, Ellie asks Paul what he truly likes about Aster. He struggles to find the right words, giving a vague and unconvincing answer. Frustrated, Ellie shares her own feelings about Aster, describing the little things she admires about her, the way she sees the world, the way she thinks, the way she expresses herself. Paul listens and realizes that Ellie's answer is what love should sound like, something he can't seem to come up with on his own. Upset, he questions whether he really loves Aster. But Ellie reassures him, telling him that no one tries harder than he does, and that effort is a kind of love too. That evening, Paul cooks his taco sausage for Ellie and her father, Edwin. They sit down to eat together, and Edwin seems to enjoy it. After dinner, they watch a movie where a man chases after a woman on a train while she watches him from the window. Paul finds the scene romantic, believing it represents grand gestures for love. But Ellie disagrees, calling it ridiculous. Later, she picks up her guitar and plays a song, Lost in Thought. Paul goes on a second date with Aster, but once again, he struggles to find the right words. As he sits there, nervous and unsure, Ellie secretly texts Aster from outside, pretending to be Paul. She writes that he gets too nervous to talk when she's around, helping smooth over the awkwardness. Paul notices Ellie through the window, shocked but also relieved that she's handling the situation. Eventually, Paul gains confidence. He puts his phone down, looks Aster in the eye, and tells her how much he likes her. Ellie is stunned. This wasn't part of the plan. After the date, Paul is ecstatic. He tells Ellie that not only did he and Aster kiss, but he also got a response from a food critic who wants to try his taco sausage. He assumes that the critic he originally reached out to must have finally contacted him. Ellie, curious, asks how he knew it was the right moment to kiss Aster. Paul explains that sometimes, a girl gives you a certain look, and when that happens, you just have to go for it. Later, at the school recital, Ellie takes the stage to play the piano, but the strings are off, making a terrible sound. The audience begins laughing, and she freezes, embarrassed. Before things can get worse, Paul quickly tosses her a guitar and tells her to play her song instead. Ellie hesitates but then starts playing, and to her surprise, the crowd responds positively. After the recital, Paul brings Ellie to the afterparty. She drinks too much, gets drunk, and ends up throwing up. Seeing that she's in no condition to go home, Paul takes her back to his place and puts her to bed. As he sets her things down, a stack of letters falls out of her bag. He picks them up and realizes they are letters she wrote to multiple food critics about his taco sausage. The next day, Aster comes by Paul's house to give him a painting. However, when she arrives, she is surprised to find Ellie there instead. Sensing the tension, Ellie quickly explains that she and Paul are just friends. Aster doesn't push the topic and instead invites Ellie to go with her to the train station where Ellie works. Afterward, Aster brings Ellie to a secluded watering hole. Without hesitation, she starts taking off her clothes to go skinny dipping. Ellie, caught off guard, quickly turns away, too nervous to look. Instead of following Aster's lead, she gets into the water fully clothed. As they float together, Aster confesses that she overheard Trig telling her father that he plans to propose to her. She isn't sure what to do and wonders if she should say yes. She admits that she even asked God for a sign, and soon after, she received Paul's letter. Ellie hesitates before admitting that she doesn't believe in God. Aster responds that she isn't sure what she believes, but she's still searching for answers. Later, Aster drops Ellie off at home, where Paul has made dinner for her and Edwin. Meanwhile, Aster talks to Paul, and during their conversation, he kisses her and invites her to his football game. She accepts. At the game, Ellie watches from the stands, cheering Paul on. Their team is known for being terrible, but against all odds, Paul scores the only touchdown. After the game, he excitedly finds Ellie and, to her complete shock, leans in to kiss her. Stunned, Ellie pulls away just as Aster, watching from a distance, sees the moment unfold. Hurt and confused, she turns and leaves without saying a word. Ellie is furious and demands to know why Paul did that. As he looks at her reaction, something clicks. He realizes she isn't just helping him because she's a good friend. She's in love with Aster. After a moment, he calls it a sin. Disgusted, he turns away and leaves, leaving Ellie standing there, devastated. When Ellie gets home, she finds Trig waiting for her, claiming she's in love with him. Too tired to argue, she sarcastically agrees, and Edwin chases Trig away with a garden hose. Meanwhile, Paul, confused about everything, Googles how do you know if you're gay. His mother later finds his search history but says nothing. When Paul drops off sausage for Edwin, he asks if he and Ellie broke up. Paul explains they were never dating, and Edwin gently tells him he doesn't really see Ellie. Speaking in Mandarin, Edwin shares how Ellie kept him going after his wife died. Then, in English, he asks if Paul has ever loved someone so much he wouldn't change a thing about them. At church, Trig suddenly proposes to Aster, and she says yes. But Ellie stands up and shouts, "No." The room falls silent. Paul stands too, saying love isn't about pretending, and no one should have to hide who they are. He apologizes to Ellie, realizing how hard it must be for her. Ellie admits she's been pretending and tells the congregation that love isn't patient or kind, it's messy, selfish, and bold. It's about taking risks, like ruining a good painting to make a great one. Aster suddenly realizes Ellie has been the one writing to her all along. Stunned and hurt, she slaps Paul and storms out. Later, Paul's mother tells him she loves him even if he's gay. He quickly clarifies, "I'm not," then adds, "but I do want to change the sausage recipe." His mother gasps in horror. At home, Edwin encourages Ellie to go to Grinnell, not wanting her to end up stuck in Squamish like him. After some thought, Ellie decides to go. Before leaving, she visits Aster to apologize. Aster, now working on a portfolio for art school, initially brushes her off. But after a moment, she admits she probably knew all along. Ellie never used enough emojis to be Paul. Aster hesitates before telling Ellie that the thought of them had crossed her mind, and maybe, if things were different. Ellie teases her for being unsure again, and Aster smirks, saying that maybe in a few years, she'll know for sure. She tells Ellie to find something to believe in while she's in Iowa. Ellie starts to leave but then suddenly turns back, rushes to Aster, and kisses her. Smiling, she tells her, "See you in a few years." As Ellie prepares to leave for good, Paul promises to look after Edwin, whose food business has taken off thanks to Ellie's help. At the train station, Paul says goodbye, and Ellie teases him not to cry. Once on the train, Ellie looks nervous. But as it starts moving, Paul suddenly runs after it, shouting her name, mimicking the dramatic movie scene they once argued about. Ellie laughs, watching him through the window. Then, turning forward, she smiles, ready for whatever comes next. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.